This is Task Tracker in command line, which I made a few months ago. Now that I look at it, this project looks like shit, since all it does is run an infinite loop while constantly checking what the user types in and does what it should based on that input. Horrible design and no way of expanding the project. So I remade this project with better interactivity, code handling, and modularity, but I tried to speedrun it to see how fast I can make it. You get 3 options which you can choose from using arrow keys, and based on what you select, you get different user interfaces. Add just asks you to type something, change simply changes the task status, and view shows you the task. I also used my favorite questionnaire package, which we will get to in a moment. I started by creating the main logic of the file, which will be inside of the main file. From there, I import questionnaire package and define a main function. From there, it's pretty simple where I just check what the user wants to do, and based on that, I call the relative functions. Now we can continue writing more code inside of this file, but that is not very clever, my friend, and ultimately makes you a bad programmer. Instead, we create 2 separate files for handling task-related functions and file-related functions, respectively. Inside of tasks file, I import questionnaire, which I will use to display the status and task IDs, but I also import stack from inspect library, which I will get to in a bit. The file structure is standard where I define a main function, tells the user to not run this file directly and import it instead. Then I define a bunch of task-specific functions. Show tasks simply shows categories and then task IDs, but here's the catch. We call show task in 2 places. Once inside of the main function in our main file, and second inside of our mark task inside of the current file. Main function shows a task and mark function changes the status of a task. I should have called it something different, but we need a way to know which function called show task function to do something specific, which is where stack comes in. It basically holds the name of all the functions that have been called in order, and if a function calls a function inside of it, stack can tell you which function called it. So I can simply check which function was it and do different things based on that. Other functions are pretty simple, so let's go over them quickly. Get task by ID simply returns a task with a given ID. Show task shows a task. Change status changes the status of a task. Mark task calls show tasks, and get task ID returns a task ID which the user wants to do something with. I also made sure to sort those IDs before displaying them. So far we have only done things with the tasks, but what about writing to and reading from a file? Let's write functions for those too. Inside of our file funcs file, following the standard process, I define a main function telling the user not to run this file, then defining a bunch of different functions. Read data simply reads the data from a file, but if the file is not readable or is empty, I just recreate the file. Write data writes to the file. Write tasks create a Python dictionary and add it to the data we just read from the file, and then write the new data to the file. Check file exists does what it says, it just checks if the file exists or not. And create file creates a file with a given structure. Now it may seem like this is yet another simple project, but it is more complex than beginner projects, including all the error checking when something goes wrong. The file structure not only makes the code reusable, but also maintainable if I want to expand the project in the future. But that's how you can upgrade your boring project to something you can showcase on your portfolio within a few hours. In total, it took me 4 hours to write the code, spanned across 2 days. Anyways, that's about it for this video. If you want to check out the project itself, I will leave the link to my GitHub in the description.
No.